My name is William Kidd. As I sailed, my name is William Kidd. As I sailed, my name is William Kidd, and God's laws I did forbid. Most wickedly I did as I sailed. Most wickedly I did as I sailed. My parents taught me well as I sailed, My parents taught me well as I sailed. My parents taught me well to shun the gates of hell. Against them I rebelled as I sailed. Against them I rebelled as I sailed. I murdered William Moore as I sailed, I murdered William Moore as I sailed. I murdered William Moore, left him lying in his gore, many miles from the shore as I sailed. Many miles from the shore as I sailed. Being cruel still as I sailed, Being cruel still as I sailed. Oh, being cruel still, my gunner I did kill. His precious blood I spilled as I sailed. His precious blood I spilled as I sailed. To execution dock I must go, To execution dock I must go. To execution dock while many thousands flock. At the striking of the clock I must go. At the striking of the clock I must go. So take a warning now by me, for I die. Take a warning now by me, for I die. Take a warning now by me, and shun bad company, lest you come to hell with me, for now I die. Lest you come to hell with me, for now I die. My name was William Kidd as I sailed, My name was William Kidd as I sailed. My name was William Kidd, and God's laws I did forbid. Oh, most wickedly I did as I sailed. Most wickedly I did as I sailed. Most wickedly I did as I sailed.
Hello, my lovely little jack-o'-lanterns, and welcome to another video. This video is a bit different because we're doing a Q&A. A month ago, or a little less than a month ago, I asked you guys on my YouNow stream to send me a bunch of questions about my books, or just questions in general about me, or if that you want to ask like my inspiration for certain things or how I do certain stuff, and send it to me either through my Gmail or on my YouTube videos. Like you can post in the comments down below on my videos, and I would go through and search them out, or on my YouNow streams directly. You guys have finally sent me a big chunker of questions, about 70 questions. So I'm going to try to answer all of them as best as I can. I'm going to keep the answers probably 1 to 2 minutes minimum, because I don't want this video to be like an hour long. But I will answer all your questions as to the best of my ability. I'm really excited. I've never really like done this before, so it's going to be weird. But yeah, so I took screenshots of all of the comments that I found for the questions and put them in a folder so I wouldn't lose them. And so I'm going to pull them up here, but in editing in this video, I will put the questions up on the screen so people can see it. I'm also going to upload this to my channel as well so people can watch it, and also so my parents, mom and dad, can see this, and my girlfriend and stuff like that. Okay, let's get started. Dude, this is... okay. Question 1 from Rob Reynolds, which was posted 2 hours ago. Okay. Where are you from originally, and where do you live now? I grew up in Longview, Texas, which was a very small East Texas town. It was very southern. Basically, there was just like farmlands, and I think the town only had like 70,000 people or something. I mean, it was decently big, but it was pretty small. I live in Colorado with my girlfriend now. What is your address? By Helper Weasley. Joan MB. How tall are you? I am a staggering 5'8". Yep. I am, I'm an average height for a dude. So yeah, there you go. By Aaron Mark. Are you British? I'm gonna let you answer that one, Aaron Mark. Bo Burney? Is Jack Bowie single? I'm gonna let my girlfriend answer that question for you. Nope, I am taken, and I'm happily taken. So, sorry, Bo Burney. Whatever your username is on YouTube, I am taken. So yeah, my girlfriend could pummel you into the ground for that. Gabriel, what video games are you into? A variety of video games. I like puzzle games, first-person shooters, adventure games, story-driven games, RPGs. But my main go-to is horror. I just really like scary stuff and dark stuff. So like I really like just like horror stuff like Outlast and Resident Evil and stuff like that. Sophia 8687. How old are you now? 24. Heed Arlen. What are your favorite types of movies? I like historical movies, dramas, horror movies. I will watch like a comedy or a romantic movie. I'm definitely more open to watching different types of genres than I was when I was younger. But yeah, that's my go-to is like historical and horror. Guitar Man 5275. What is your favorite type of food? Fried chicken, baby. Woo! Some mashed potatoes, green beans, and fried chicken and some bread. That's it. You can that is my meal. By Data Hog. What type of music do you listen to? I listen to all types. I listen to like pirate music, like sea shanties, Celtic and fantasy medieval music. Sometimes techno. Ancient Viking music. I have a weird music selection, but I like what I like, and yeah, I like classical as well. Green Hood Gaming. Hello, sir. That is a nice picture. Are you into anime? What is your favorite beer and animal? Okay, that's like 3 questions in one. Okay. Yeah, I like anime. I don't watch it as often as I used to, but I like Black Butler and My Hero Academia and stuff. It's pretty good. My favorite beer is Guinness, and my favorite animal is a polar bear. By Missing Note, yes. When did you start writing? I started kind of writing in middle school. I took a lot of inspiration from Rick Riordan, who wrote like the Heroes of Olympus series and like the Lightning Thief and stuff. With what is that guy? Percy Jackson. That's the character's name. But it wasn't like anything serious. Like I just kind of fooled around with it. I didn't really start taking it more seriously as like a hobby until like high school, where I started to get into more like fantasy and like history stuff. So yeah, I would say probably since middle school. By Royalty. What is your preferred genre to write and why? My preferred genre to write is historical fiction. Mainly because I just like history. I find it very intriguing. There's so many diverse topics and time periods that you can choose from. And also, depending on the time period, different areas and different countries are doing different things at the time. And so, I don't know, it's very interesting to me. It makes for a good story preference and like kind of the bones of a tale. I really enjoy it a lot, and I just really enjoy writing in general. Like, it just makes me very happy. By JC, what was your inspiration for the Order series? Why sailors instead of nobility? That's a good question. My inspiration for the Order series came from a book called The Captain's Daughter. It was set in the 1700s, and it was about like this captain of a ship whose daughter was abducted by pirates, and he had to go rescue her. And it was kind of taking place over kind of near Africa and like the Mediterranean. And it kind of went into like the African mythology and lore from the perspective of Englishmen. And so I took great inspiration from that book and kind of incorporated more of like a background of it to help me write the Order. I also just wanted to write something about pirates and sailors because I love pirates and sailors and kind of the Age of Sail era. I decided to do sailors instead of nobility because I feel like nobility is done so much in books and movies in those eras like 1800s and 1700s. Because nobility was all pompous, rich dudes that were assholes, or not all of them, but a lot of them were asses. And like their life and glamour was always depicted so definitively. And so I wanted to pick sailors because it was a commoner's choice. It was a commoner's trade. And it was from the perspective of a regular human being, not someone who had the silver spoon handed to them all their life and had everything done for them. And they lived in these rich, elaborate mansions and palaces and stuff. So I wanted to kind of depict the rougher side of life. And back then, sailors' lives were very rough. They were very brutal, very sad even. And so I feel like kind of portraying that in a character was a good way to go. By Emily Adams, what is the overall message and theme in the Order? The overall theme and message in the Order, from what I wanted to get across to the reader, was to do the right thing in a justice type manner, no matter the consequences, no matter the cost. Because the whole thing about the Order is like doing the right thing and, you know, setting and following this kind of path of righteousness and light, and kind of keeping by the sacred code that these like close-hooded men kept for centuries. And if someone were to like break off from that, it would just be like shattered into glass. Kind of to do right by your loved ones and friends and close-parted companions, and to be kind of a good person. Caleb Sifin-Mamahak. Okay, dude, I'm sorry. I do not know how to say that. What is your opinion on your YouTube channel getting terminated? I'm glad you have it back because I love the content you produce on your channel. Your last upload was November 18th of 2021 and then poof gone. What happened? Oh, thank you. That's very nice. I try really hard to produce decent content on my channel. So my channel got terminated last year of November because I uploaded a video of a Victorian fact video in England, and it had some nudity in it. It was like a half nude woman painting kind of thing. It got labeled as like a sexual thing, and so, which wasn't true, and it was complete bullshit. I basically woke up one morning and my channel was gone, and I had lost everything, and I was really sad and depressed about it, because I put a lot of hard work and effort into making that community and building that up. But I did get it back, which is great. So I'm currently uploading a ton of videos right now, including this one, that I've already pre-recorded. So that's awesome. But I sent in like 3 appeals and the first 2 were rejected. And then like literally this September, I sent in a 3rd appeal. And then like a couple days later, I just got my channel back magically. And they were like, oh, we found nothing of like ill behavior in your channel, so you can have it back. I do think YouTube is struggling. And I've talked about this in one of my videos that I posted like a month ago about how I feel like there's this split diversity on the YouTube platform where you feel like you have to upload a certain amount of content, or like you only can upload a certain type of video. And if you upload something strange or weird or unnatural, you won't get any views or any likes, and people will like not like it. And so there's this whole conspiracy thing with YouTube right now going on. It's a big thing. Like big YouTubers have talked about it already, that there's a whole type of favoritism compared to huge rich YouTubers and small YouTubers like myself, who small YouTubers don't get the limelight and the spotlight that they deserve, even though they produce a lot of content more and more content and put a lot more work in it than other people do and still don't get noticed. So yeah, I do feel like YouTube is shooting itself in the foot. It's not a platform like it used to be 5 years ago where you could just upload anything and have fun. It's like there's so much like statistics and rules and like fucking issues you have to abide by. And if you stray from the path even a little bit, it's like you start a war. It's just, I'm not going to get into it, but it's just ridiculous. Freckled Cracker. Is streaming on YouNow different than YouTube? Will you do streams for your books on YouTube, please? Yes, I would like to do streams on YouTube for my books and have reading sessions. It is different on YouNow because YouNow is a different platform and they don't use YouTube to link. You can't like link your streams to the YouTube itself. So it's just like on that platform and that's it. But I would like to do YouTube streams on here. Yeah, I get back into it. By Floorboard. Are you worried you'll be labeled as a racist writer due to some topics in your novels? Okay, that's a tricky question. I'll answer it as best as I can. Personally, no. I'm not worried I'll be labeled as that type of author because there is slavery in my novels, depending on the time period it's set in, like in the order, and if I write anything set in like the Civil War or anything like that. I mean, let's be real, slavery was a thing and it was terrible, but it happened and it was in history. So I don't feel like I need to sugarcoat that or gloss over that just because people will find that hard to read. I don't care what people think about my writing. I don't care what people perceive me as a human being anymore, not like I used to. And so I definitely will be, I will be aware and considerate of those topics, but that doesn't mean I'm going to care if someone calls me racist because I'm not a racist. Kyoto a demon. Do you want to be a famous author like Rowling or Stephen King? If you were to get that famous, what would you do with it? I mean, I do want to become famous, but not in a Rowling or Stephen King or like Tolkien sense. I want to become known. I want to be like an author who's like, oh, hey, I know that guy. I know Jack Bowie. He wrote those books and they were really good. Like something like that. I don't really want to get like super famous and like drown in it. I mean, if I ever did get that famous, I don't think it's going to happen. I wouldn't let it get to my head or anything because I don't really want to be that famous. I just want to be known. By Pitmaster J. Are there any characters in your books you've based off of people you know or relationships, friends, family, etc.? Yes. In the Order series, I based off Sir Arthur and Mallory as me and my father and the relationship we had and kind of the advice he's given me in my personal life. Sophie, the woman who like basically just like seduces and uses Mallory for a pawn in a romantic sense, I based off like a crazy lunatic girl I knew in high school. It was like that. Yeah, there's a bunch of different characters I've based off people in my life, like different friends and family and stuff like that. So yeah, not every single one, but some. AJ, do you plan to write a lot of books? Yes, I do plan to write a lot of books. Dragon, you covered nearly 85 years in 5 books, which is crazy. How did you do it? How do you come up with stories so vast like this? Okay, I'm gonna try to think of how to explain it. I don't know. I have a knack for creating big epic tales, and I don't know, I wanted to kind of create a story that scopes across multiple continents like Africa, Arabia, England, Italy, that kind of thing, and cover different various perspectives in the same family bloodline and cover multiple decades of a family's journey. I don't know if there's really an answer of how I do it. It's more of just like I just think it up and kind of decide which way I want the story to foretell. And I just want it to become like a really interesting like story to get across to the reader. I don't know. I guess that's the best way I can answer it. So sorry if I didn't answer your question perfectly. By Redneck Farmer. Yeehaw! Who's your favorite character you've created so far in your literary journey? From which novel? You can only pick one. Dude, don't do that to me. I have so many characters I picked and it was good. That's hard, dude. That's fucking hard. I would say Thomas from The Order, from book 3 and onward. His character development is so goddamn good because he goes from like literally like a little runt who craves his father's approval and his father's opinion on everything, and then when he loses that and he has to be pushed out into the world on his own and make his own decisions and make his own way and his own path, he like becomes basically essentially a pirate sailor badass and like learns how to protect his family and defend for himself and his friends, and he starts his own business in Africa. I think his journey from like a teenager to like an old ass man at the age of 90 is pretty damn good. So I would say Thomas Blackwood. Dignity, favorite villain you've created? Probably the Buzzard from The Order. Yeah, just some guy without a mustache. The amount of character development in your books is amazing. Your world building and intricate storytelling through history is unreal. You are an astounding writer, some of the best I've ever heard. I've listened to some of You, The Bloodless, and it is magical and amazing. Thank you for bringing that into my life, Mr. Bowie. That's not really a question, but thank you. That was really nice of you. JJC3. Is there a historical time period you are not familiar with that you want to try writing? Yes, I'm not very familiar with ancient histories like ancient Asia, ancient Rome, Egyptian mythology, prehistoric type times. I do want to write books set in those eras, but I would have to do immense research to figure that out because I don't know enough knowledge about that because I'm not really studied it. So yeah, I do want to write stuff in that era. Yeah. Casey Colt. What is your goal in writing that you want to leave when you die? Jesus Christ. Okay. Really just to leave a writing legacy behind me, like to leave on the world when I do die, to show that I wrote all these books and I was capable of writing those books, and to leave stories for people to enjoy and read. Jacob Remper. Is a bully a wizard? I swear this guy knows like every damn thing in the universe. Did you base him off any mythologies? He's not a wizard. He's just a regular human being or a regular freed slave. I did not base him off any mythologies. Slightly African lore. But no, he's just a guy that's super wise, and he like is very caring and charismatic and helps the Blackwood characters throughout their life as kind of like a mentor and like older brother kind of thing. So yes, he knows everything because he's super wise. Charles Anastasio. What is the Blackwood Blade? The Blackwood Blade, if you've read the books, is a blade passed down by Sir Francis Drake to Sir Arthur, who is Mallory's father. It is a long, it's basically a rapier. It's got like a golden circular hilt so you can hold it like this and it wraps around your hand. And it's super long and thin and sharp, and it's made of Toledo blue steel, which can be found in the Candy Kunush Mountains in Arabia. So it is made out of a blue ingot. That is African gems. Very magical. Mimizella. The Blackwoods' legacy is some of the best family writing I've ever seen or has been depicted. You nailed seeing Mallory grow into a father really well. You wrote a young man's struggles with love, grief, and revenge amazingly, mainly in the 1600s. So tell me, dear Jack, why did you fucking decide to blow off both his damn legs? Look, okay, I've gotten a lot of gripe about that. People did not like that I did that. But here's the thing. Not everything can go perfect. Just because it's a book and it's a made-up story doesn't mean the plot line is going to go perfectly well all the time. People are going to fuck up. People are going to die. People are going to make mistakes. He's made it so well in his life from that point on that it was kind of his time. It was his time to end. It was his journey was coming to an end. And Thomas and Dorian's journey was coming to light. It was time to tell their story. So his character was slowly fading away. It was time for him to go, basically. Yes, it was tragic. Yes, it was gruesome and awful, and it was terrible. But people make mistakes. Not everything can go according to plan on certain things. He made a mistake, and he didn't leave the powder fuse in time, and he got his legs blown off, and his friend Big Danny got killed. You know, shit happens. And that's what I try to get in my stories, is try to include a sense of realism to it. Is like, not everything is going to go perfectly. Not everything is roses and daisies. You know, terrible things happen and you just have to accept it. Tango Mango. Why did you decide to have Dorian convert to Islam and Arabic traditions? I wanted to personally explore the Arabic religion in this book because in the 1600s, it was very apparent in England, because at that time, Arabia and England were trading very, very much. They were trading like spices and wine and coffee and wool and weapons and all that kind of stuff. And they were also at heads. So I think having brother against brother pit against is the perfect tale of like a historical epicness. And he was also kind of forced to, because he was sold into slavery in Arabia, and he was basically chosen to convert to Islam or he was going to be killed. So he didn't really have a choice. But I wanted to kind of explore that mythology, honestly. Mr. E. Mallory's death was one of the saddest things I've ever read. Actually physically made me cry. I'm not joking, LOL. Why did you have him die? This is similar to the other question. Because it was his time to go. I had written all I could about that character. His death was very sad. It was very tragic because he basically lost both his legs. He was incapacitated for the rest of his life, and his legs got infected with gangrene, and then he just got sick and he passed away in his sleep. In a way, it was peaceful, but it was very sad. I wanted to depict a sad death for him because I wanted to get that emotion across to the reader. RGV Stories. Is the order going to be made into a movie? No, probably not. It would take billions of dollars to create that in a live action sense because it is so expansive and so vast. I don't think it would be possible. I think I could see maybe in like 10 years or something if it was to get picked up and my book did well. I do think it would be like a realistic animation type thing. That's like split into like 5 seasons, like each book is a season and it'll be like animated. So yeah. Martin, is Jim the first guy to see the elephants from an Englishman's perspective in the hinterland? Yes. So the area he goes to in Africa is actually a real place called the hinterland. And at that time period, because he got there in 1704, I believe. So, yeah, so basically, other than the African tribes that lived in the area, he is the first white man to ever see that valley where the elephants are in 1,000 years. Kurt's Crib. Do you own any pets? I do. I own a pit bull named Hella and a cat named Sylvie, Sylvie is right here. Say hi, Silvers. She's asleep. Boredom 120. Does your girlfriend like your books? I would hope so. Yes, she likes my books. She's stated that she may not like every single thing that I write, but for the majority, she enjoys them. Greasy Gamer. Is Between Two Souls the darkest book you've written so far? Why is it so scary and creepy? For right now, from the stuff that I've written, yes, it is currently the most darkest and gruesome book I've ever written, even passing the Order's gruesomity. It's so dark because of the time it's set in. It's set in medieval France in the 1300s during the Black Plague, which was literally one of the worst plagues ever. It killed 1 million people. And at that time, that population was staggering. It was just so intense and so awful that, and a lot of people in that time were very poor. Like, a lot of the world wasn't explored. Ships weren't really super big like in the Order. And so it was harder to sail across the ocean than it was in like the 15 or 1600s. So a lot of the world wasn't known very well, except for bordering countries like England, France, and Italy kind of thing, because they were smacked together with land. There was no water separating them. So yeah, it's just dark because the time was dark. Dong 2, why do you like writing dark things? I like writing scary and dark things because I like evoking a sense of horror in a character. And I like discussing darker topics in books because I feel like it's interesting in a historical setting to talk about, because in that time, mental health was obviously not a thing like it is now. So yeah. I just like dark things. I just like horror and scary shit. So yeah, that's pretty much why. Potion. Was it hard writing your Victorian romantic book? Yes. I've never written a romantic book like that before. There is some stuff I need to fix in it. But yeah, it was very hard because I wrote from a woman's perspective and it was solely really romantic and slightly comedic. I've never done that before. So it was very hard, but I really enjoyed writing it a lot. Lord Generous, are you really going to write a book set in every time period? Yes. Yes, I am. Mazine Brogner. Hey, Jack, big fan of your books here. I know Hugo the Bloodless still being written. I've heard almost up to chapter 108. It's great so far. I want to know, how did you come up with it? Your own runic and magic systems, language, world, creatures. I took a lot of inspiration from kind of different fantasy writers. I've read a lot of fantasy books in my life so far. That made me sound super old. I'm only 24. I took inspiration, some from Lord of the Rings, some from Rick Riordan, some from The Ranger's Apprentice. I took like the school system from The Ranger's Apprentice a little bit. They had a school system in that series, but it wasn't magical. It was more realistic. Changed it up a lot and added magic to it. I don't know. I've always wanted to write a fantasy book like that, like with like a really cool magic stuff. I really like runes. I find like Norse runic stuff very interesting. And so I wanted to just create a magic system that was believable and made sense, but also was just like really fun to read. The language and world, I wanted a world that had everything. Like desert, snow, all the seasons, forest, jungle, mountains, caverns, farmlands, villages, every single goddamn environment you could think of, I wanted it in there and smack dab and balled up into a world. Creatures, I make up my own creatures. Obviously, they're inspired by like actual creatures like vampires and dragons and stuff like that, but they're obviously altered a lot. But yeah, guess what? There's no dragons in Hugo the Bloodless. Boom, I'm not going for those tropes. There is a dragon skeleton. The language speak, I wanted to just come up with just interesting language. I took a lot of inspiration from Nordic speak, and kind of Greek, and Latin. So yeah, I just kind of like changed up my own words and I basically just made up words and made it into a language in different languages. So like Yale is like story knots, so you use ropes and it's just like you run your finger along it and you can read the grooves, which is similar to runes. Syrah is very similar to Nordic. I just made up a bunch of words. And then there's Modagian is kind of like Greek. Then there's like dragon speak, swineherd, which is like sailor speak, which is like really poor English, like uneducated people. There, farmers speak, there's all kinds of stuff. Elvish, I got Elvish in there, and Fae speak, which is very like magical and ethereal. Swift Cynical, have you always wanted to write a really long medieval fantasy book? I don't know how someone could carry a story for that long. It is truly unbelievable. One of the best fantasy books I've heard in a long time, and when it's done, I'm ready to sink my teeth into it. Why are you wanting it to be this long, over 5,000 pages? Are any characters based on people you know in real life? How'd you come up with Hugo? He's probably one of the best book protagonists I've ever read. Thank you, that was very nice of you. Yeah, I've always wanted, like I said before, to write a really long fantasy book, like a big epic armada of a thing. I don't know, I just wanted, also I'm trying to beat Marcel Proust and write over 4,125 pages and be the longest fiction book ever written. Very excited about that. So I'm trying to beat a record, but I also just want it to be really long because I feel like fantasy books are cut so short. Like, they always end so abruptly, or there's no closure, or there's loopholes left in the story that people need answers to. And I want to make sure I account for everything, and everything that I say in the book is going to happen, and there's going to be a conclusion. That's why I want it to be so long, because I also like to pace stories very slowly. I don't like to rush. So like, we may spend 70 chapters in one fucking city. So what? I want to fucking do that. I want to spend time, get to know the characters, know the place, the environment, the world. Hugo is based off myself. A lot of it is based off myself. A lot of his friends and stuff are based off people that I've met in my life and friends that I have had and that have left an impression on me. Is Ori a Fae? I'm not gonna tell you that. Is Bast Hugo's son? I must know. Figure it out yourself. Rocket Jim, how did you think of the masters at the university? They're basically just like professors at a school. It's not that hard. Like, I just thought of basically people and teachers that taught different realms of magic. If you can explain, what is your take on violence in books? Compared to movies, obviously. What about graphic human-on-human battles and fantasy stories? You're the only author I've seen that has used the human-on-human fight in a fantasy novel. It's done well, but it's rough and dark. Why do you tend to be violent and graphic in your books? This is an interesting topic that I think authors have been discussing for a while. Violence is essentially an art form. Now, compared to movies and books, violence in a book and a movie are very different. Because there's like action movies where violence is depicted so poorly, and it's just there for the sake of violence and it's stupid. And then there's violence that is used as an art, where it's there to evoke the graphicity and the brutality of it to someone who's watching or reading it. Because like, think about, there's violence even in children's movies, like The Lion King, when the lion's dad dies, there's violence in all sorts of things. I think violence, it should be depicted not gratuitously, but also in a way that it helps propel the story further, and it helps shape the character and kind of the plot. Violence in fantasy books have been obviously very shaded over, and I feel like violence in general in books are shaded over because it's so sugar-coated. Like, I feel like people are so afraid to get graphic and up close with like fights and stuff, and to depict blood and guts and gore. And I'm not. I like depicting violence and like the guts and entrails of people coming out when you stab them with a sword, or like someone's jaw being blown off. Like, it just creates such a human raw like depiction. It's so visceral. And I feel like in fantasy books, it's not shown well. And so showing that human on human violence propels that human authenticity. It propels that human feeling that, like, yeah, there's still human on human violence. And to have it depicted in a fantasy along with creatures is fucking awesome. And so I wanted to do that. I feel like it being rough and dark is the right road to go. What's in the thrice locked chest? Tell me. Nope. How does Hugo get to the Waystone Inn? Is Old Cobb actually Manette? Their character descriptions are the same. Haha. So just have to find. I'm sorry. These questions I'm not answering because I haven't written it yet. Hugo's friends' relationships are some of the best depictions of that type of development I've read. Their friendships feel so real and true. How well do you convey emotions? How do you do it? The talk of killing a man with tempeh was so raw and genuine it broke my heart. I'm trying to write a fantasy book too, but barely started it. You, sir, have given me such a great inspiration. You are a well of creation, Jack. Your descriptions of each place in the book is beautiful. Can you give me some writing tips? Are you asking for how to depict emotions and characters? Just be honest. Just reach into your own heart and base it off of emotions you felt in certain situations in your personal life. Depict emotions that would make someone feel them, like happiness, joy, sadness, fear, grief, anxiety, that kind of thing, anger. If you're writing a fantasy book, don't go for the tropes. Make something up of your own. And I know it's hard because it is hard to write a fantasy book. It's been one of the hardest books that I've written ever, because I'm having to account for everything. I have to have an explanation for everything. I'm making everything up in my mind. So it's taking a lot longer. Start slow, do not rush into it, and just go crazy. Like, make up characters, make up your own magic, make up your own creatures, your world, build it up from the ground up. And take inspiration from other books, take inspiration from my book. I don't mind. You just have to be an honest human and create what real humans feel. Don't make it scripted. Make it seem realistic. Where does your family live? Okay, little lobsters. My parents live in California. Is the mayor Hugo's uncle as lackless as aunt? How so? Is Hugo a jack of all trades? Yes, he is. Technically, yes, he's a Renaissance man. He can play the lute. He's very smart. He can invent things. He learns how to wield a sword, learns how to wield magic. He can ride a horse. He's a jack of all trades. The only thing he's not good at is alchemy. He's got to have one flaw. Galleon Leo. How did you come up with unique names for your characters? Simon Ficklefoot, Wilhelm Daviar, Mayor Averon, Hugo de Conia Bloodless. What does Bloodless? I just make up names. Sometimes I'll go to a fantasy generator and just make up names if I can't think up of them. But in a fantasy book, you kind of have to have whack names because it's a fantasy world and it's kind of weird and crazy and magical. So you got to have unique names. You don't want to have an epic fantasy story and then have someone be like William Stanley or something like that. Like something boring like that. You got to make him magical sounding. Bloodless is essentially bloodless. He can't bleed. And you'll find out why he can't bleed later in the book, and I'm not going to tell you. Vent Goblin, what time periods do you absolutely refuse to write? Modern time periods. Hands down, I refuse to write modern time periods. Anything about the 40s and beyond, I just don't care about. It's a time period I'm not interested in. It's boring to me. And history is so much more fun to write. So yeah, I'm not going to ever write a modern book. The farthest I would go is the 20s. Why do you like discussing hard to talk about topics in historical settings? I know one of your books is going to start out set in 1828 about a man shooting himself in the head, suicide, depression, anxiety, and fear. This goes back to mental health. Mental health was obviously not talked about in historical times because it was not known. Because if someone felt sad or was depressed, they didn't view it as depression. It was just melancholy. And feelings back then weren't talked about a lot, especially among men, because you were seen as being basically a pussy and you were showing fear and weakness. But having that type of discussion in those settings with real characters, it portrays a sense of realism and it humanizes them. A guy thought differently in 1760, of course, compared to this, but they still felt emotions that we feel today. Love, sadness, joy, emotions, fear, anxiety, worries. They all felt those same things that we feel today. It was just in a different time and a different scope. And I feel like writing time periods and writing about historical eras, I don't want it to be forgotten. I want to show the world that history is beautiful and it is extravagant and it is glamorous and amazing. And show like, hey, yeah, this battle may have happened on the sea shores of Africa 400 years ago, but it still barely but slightly affected the way the world runs today. That to me is what I want to get across. Why do you care so much about historical accuracy? Historical accuracy means everything to me. You have to be accurate if you're writing a book set in a historical time period or an era. You cannot dismiss accuracy. You can't write a book in 1860 and include fucking cars, because cars weren't invented until the 1890s. So you have to account for everything. You can't have time periods intermesh with each other unless it's like a steampunk or fantasy thing. Because like, for example, in Hugh of the Bloodless, it's set in 1260, but it's an alternate medieval 1260 world with magic and with creatures and with like kind of things. So there is steampunk elements to it where they have gear winds and clocks and stuff like that, which didn't actually exist in the actual 1200s. You have to have historical accuracy in everything. You can't. It's important because it gets your story across correctly and independently. It gets your story across in better ways because people will know if it's an obvious blatant. You don't want to be talking out of your ass because that'll make a reader mad, that'll make the other authors mad that care about historical accuracy. It's very important. Same thing with, it doesn't matter what it is, you have to take account of everything. Weapons that were being made at the time, clothing styles, fashion, medicine properties, what was being invented, what was happening in the world at that time, what discoveries were being made, you know, who was alive at that time, what famous people were alive. You have to take that into account. How people thought. You have to put yourself in the shoes of, like, if you're playing a 17th century nobleman, you have to put yourself in the shoes. Also, I realize I haven't been calling out some of the names. I'm really sorry about that. I just kind of got swept up into the questions. Gilgalo or Gigolo. Are you a tea or a coffee person? If so, what type of coffee flavor and tea do you like? I like both. I don't know. I like both. So I'm typically more of a coffee person though. I just like the heartiness of the drink. Also, I like dark coffee, like dark blend. But I do like different teas like Earl Grey and jasmine tea and green tea and herbal and stuff. Luke Watson. In the Order Book 3, why did Thomas not die when he was shot by William in the Tower of London docks? And I don't know if you've read the book, but it seems like you have read Book 3. Luke Watson. He didn't die because he was shot like near the rib cage or just like under it. So it didn't hit as hard or anything. And also a bully like pulled the bullet out with his fingers, like literally like a minute later. So that's why he survived. And he like stopped, like wrapped his hole and his bleeding up. Kareem Mabluk. Did you at first wanted to have Sir Mallory lose his legs, or did you have other plans for his death? Yeah, I had other thoughts of like how I wanted him to die before I wrote the scene. I originally wanted to have him die just by getting gangrene and just dying from a sickness, but then I kind of felt like that was too like stupid. It would be too abrupt. And so I felt like having something so tragic happen to him and then having like that slow decline till he died was more of a better storytelling than it would have been to just have him die from a disease. Dragar. Why is the Order so good? The plot is one of the best stories I've ever read. How do you split fiction and historical events? Thank you. That's very nice of you to say. I'm glad you like the Order, or I don't know if you've read the entire series, if you read part of it. Thank you. So basically, it's pretty simple. You know, I will take like a historical time period that I want to write about. Like, for example, the first start of the Order, it's 1630. So and I took kind of like the English and Dutch were at war. And like England was trading with Arabia at that time. And so like there's a lot of exploration. And so I used that as a background to formulate a fictional story within those realistic and real life events. Because also England was sending ships to sail to Africa and the Cape of Good Hope. and stuff like that for trade with Dutch people, African tribes, and stuff like that, slaves. And so it was already kind of happening in this point of where the series started. So basically I just pick a historical event that I want to write about, and then I figure out how I want to weave fictional characters and a fictional story and kind of like intermesh them together so it makes sense and it flows well. Vlick72, are you planning to write a prequel for from Sir Arthur's perspective set in the late 1500s and early 1600s? Yes. I am planning to write a prequel from Sir Arthur's perspective. I don't know when I'm going to write it because I'm still heavily working on Hugo the Bloodless, and then I want to write a Leonardo da Vinci one after this in the 1400s. So it may be a few books after, but I actually wanted to. I feel like I told Sir Arthur's character well enough in the first book, but I thought it would be cool to kind of get from his perspective, and kind of, it would basically foretell like him being like in his like 18, 19 years old, and it would end basically where Mallory was kind of 3-4 years old and his mother passing away. Nick T, what was Mallory's biggest fear? Mallory's biggest fear was being alone. That's why he always wanted people and trusted companions beside him most of his life, like a bully, his sons, his wife's. Bob Vance, how did Sir Arthur find a bully and bring him to England? So that is, I referenced it a little bit in the first novel, towards the beginning, but I didn't go in insane detail about it, because I do plan to write a prequel where obviously you get to see that happen. But long story short, basically a bully was captured when he was 13 from Africa, and he was brought over on a slave ship to England, and he like worked on English plantations for a few years, because Sir Arthur didn't find him until roughly a bully was like 21. So he came over to England. He got to England when he was like 15. So yeah, so he basically finds a bully and buys him off a slave block, and then that's pretty much it. And then kind of entrusts him into the care of Mallory, because at that point Sir Arthur's wife had passed. Chromie Baba, did Sir Arthur sail with Sir Francis Drake, the famed explorer, and when? Yes, he did. That is where the Blackwood Blade comes from. And yeah, he sailed with him in the 1580s. So yeah, that he did sail with Sir Francis Drake to like the Horn of Hormuz and kind of near like the Mediterranean. Game Erica, Dorian and Thomas's brotherly bond is so great. I'm glad through the series you kept that going. Why were they always so close? They just were naturally close characters. I wanted them to be close as like a story device. They were originally closer to Mallory as his sons, because they were the most like Mallory, like their personality and like their viewpoints on like different topics and opinions in life were very similar to Mallory compared to like Edwin and William. And they were also the most kind-hearted souls out of the four brothers. And so they bonded over that. And also Thomas always vouched to protect his little brother, not only from William, but also just from the harsh elements of the world, and promised him that he would never leave him. And also Thomas like went and searched for Dorian when he went missing, and it took him like 10 years. Lukewarm. Why did Edwin hate his brother so much? He hated Dorian, but he hated Thomas even more. Because he was jealous and he envied how close Thomas was to his father compared to Edwin, because Edwin was kind of tossed on the sidelines a little bit, and he wasn't a sailor. He didn't want to have that life like his father did and Thomas did and Dorian did. He wanted to kind of do his own thing and branch away from the family business. And so, but he didn't do it in a right way. And so Mallory knew that, and it kind of shifted their relationship a bit. And he always just envied his brother, because his brother always got his father's attention more, and he always got to do stuff more than Edwin. And so that kind of formed that rivalry between them. Charlie Tomboy, was William a psychopath? 100% yes. William was a psychotic lunatic. He was a psychopath. Yeah. He had very little lack of empathy, no feelings for people except for himself, very narcissistic. Yeah, he was a psychopath. Snooty, did William care about his father Mallory? Yes and no. he cared about him in a like love because he's my father sense, but he was like a means to an end to William, because William was basically waiting for him to die so he could inherit the Blackwood estate and get all that money and basically run the business himself, because at that time he was the oldest. He was 24 years old, and that in that era, when your parent would pass away, if they owned like land or estate or had a title, it would pass down to the eldest son, and they would take care of it. And so William knew that and knew Mallory, and they knew they were very rich in England. They were a very well-respected family up in the high nobility in the English Commonwealth. And so he cared about Mallory in like a fatherly sense, kind of, but he also did not give a shit about him as well. He just cared about himself. Authorized. Why did you go for a brother against brother in the series? Man, there's a lot of questions about the order. I guess because it's my biggest series so far. For the dramatic part, it's very dramatic, and it makes for a good revenge tale, and it makes for a good story in general, pitting brother against brother, because in these time periods, a lot of that stuff happened where brothers had different opinions on things, and they were on opposing sides in battles all the time. And so that was honestly, it was a very common thing for a brother to fight against a brother in war, or in a scuffle or a quarrel, or have a simple disagreement. So it was mainly because it not only was it very apparent during that time, but it was also a good story device. Natsuku. During the first two books, the English and Dutch were at war in the 1630s. In the first one, Mallory's enemies were mainly Dutch, but in the second one, a Dutch captain, Tribblebush, they ended up being friends. In book 5, Jim falls in love with Louisa, a Dutch girl, but that's in the early 1700s. Did you purposely intend for that parallel? Yes, I did. It's irony. So basically, in the first two books, the English and the Dutch were at war for many, many, many years. It was like an on and off war that lasted like 300 years. It started in like the early 1600s and then ended around like 1808. 1808, 1810, when the Dutch got their independence from England. But because basically England was trying to invade Denmark, and the Dutch rebelled, obviously, because you're trying to protect your country. But I had that purposely, that ironic parallel between the two characters, how Mallory had enemies in the Dutch, even though he befriended one in the second book. And then at the time period where the last book is set, the Dutch and English were not at war at that time. It was kind of like a peace. It was eventually broken in like 1723. But for like a good like 20 years, it was pretty peaceful. And so having an Englishman fall in love with a Dutch girl, I think would have gotten that across, that, hey, let's set our quarrels aside and be friends. Akio's Robin. Was Christopher born out of wedlock? Yes, he was. Because he was born from Caroline when Thomas slept with her when he was a teenager. But and so he was basically when Caroline went to Bombay, India. Christopher was born like roughly a year or so later. Alexander John, what was your favorite part about writing the Order and just writing in general? Probably because not only is it one of my favorite time periods in history, it is also just getting to write about like sailors and like pirates and kind of like going to like the Caribbean and like Africa and stuff. It was so cool. And like the writing kind of like how the life on a ship worked and how it was done. How they got provisions and how battles were fought and on the sea, and it was just so interesting and intriguing to me. Just writing in general, not only does it bring me great joy to write, but I guess the way I could put it is, not only does writing bring me happiness, but the fact that I could sit down on a computer and create this whole story, this whole world, and these cast of characters from my head and express that out in the form of writing, and then share it with you guys and share it with the world. That is what makes me happy about it and why I enjoy it so much, because you as the author have complete control over your book. You have complete control over which way you want the story to turn and twist. Your story can go wherever you want. You can make up any plot line, any character, and that's what's so fun about it, is there's so many possibilities. Soulless Ginger. Is Slow John in book 1 a serial killer? He technically is. Obviously, serial killers, there wasn't a real name for it. There was also a serial killer in the second book as well. But yeah, Slow John, the executioner in the first book, was technically a serial killer. Yes. Spoud Henry. Was Cardinal Peter Stryker afraid of Mallory? Yes, he was. Because Peter Stryker was someone who was such a good duelist and such a good swordsman that he was like almost never defeated in fights or in duels or in a battle or whatever. And he was so highly trained. And so Mallory was someone who could oppose him and could match him blade against blade. And so that did scare Peter Stryker, because in that moment, he realized, at the end of book 1, he realized, he's like, holy shit, this guy could kill me. Like, he's that good. Gavin Rutledge. Why did Marquis still go to hell? Because of all the bad things he did in his life. Didn't matter. He, in that kind of time period where religion was such a big thing, he did so many bad things, and he murdered people, and he stole from people, and he raided villages and stuff during the plague. And so, even though, yeah, he got redeemed and he got a second chance at life, he's still went to hell. He's not a bad person, but he committed bad things. And so, in God's eyes, that was not good enough for him to go to heaven. Spider Boy. Okay, so this is a question for Between Two Souls. Actually, it's 3 questions, sorry. No, it's fine. Are the monsters that Marquis fights real or in his head? Why was Marquis so mean at the first half of the book to Delphine? And did Marquis love the priest? No. The monsters were real. They were not in his head. Marquis was so mean to her because he had lost his son. And his family his wife and his son were taken away from him, as well as his land. And so he was kind of bitter and hateful to other people because he was wronged. And there was no justice being brought about it. And so he was realizing he had to kind of do that and bring that into his own hands and figure that out. And so he was so mean to her because to him, she was just like a nuisance and annoying kid. But as obviously the story progressed, he ended up loving her in kind of like a daughter-father sense. And did Marquis love the priest? Yes, he did. He cared about the priest a lot. Felicia Burton. What was the purpose of the maple tree in chapter 16? It was a symbolization of rebirth. Basically saying, she was an angel and angels can do miracles. And so essentially, in a plague-ridden land, that means magic and life and happiness can still grow. Miranda Singer, will you write other books similar to Between Two Souls? Yeah, I do want to write some more medieval books, like realistic medieval. Because right now, this fantasy one it's medieval fantasy. But I do want to write another one that's set during the plague again, but from like a different perspective. I may do it in England, because I did Between Two Souls in France. And I was going to do it where like a stable boy and a monk are trapped in a monastery, and it all takes place in a monastery. Hi, Danny. Who took Marquis' lands and wife? Who was his enemy? The Comte de Gurvis was an English general who the English beat the French during this time in the Battle of Crecy, which took place in 1346. And Marquis basically lost the battle, and his lands was forfeited, and his wife was taken from him. Because back then, if a person, if another country took another country over, they have that title and that right to take that land and take people's stuff, which is terrible, but that's how it worked. Sam Pearson, did you take inspiration from Downton Abbey for your romantic Victorian book? No, not really. I mean, kind of-ish. Kind of. More like the comedic stuff. But no, I didn't really take inspiration from Downton Abbey. I just kind of took inspiration from like other romantic books that I read. Jude, do you method act your characters depending on the time era? Yep, I do. When I was writing the order, I tried to think like a 17th century sailor and listen to their music, walk and talk like one and dress like one, think like one, stuff like that. And yeah, for any time period that I do, I listen whenever I'm writing a book, depending on the time period, I'll listen to a type of music, like medieval music or like Asian music or whatever, fantasy music. If I'm writing a fantasy book, it really fuels my creativity. The Gebbers. Why did you write magnum opus? I wanted to kind of write just like a short novella. It was only and I always kind of wanted to write a biography. I do plan to write a biography about Captain Kidd in the future. That won't be a lot longer. because the magnum opus is like 200 pages. It was meant to be very short, but I wanted like a creepy, like novella type biographical story with like creepy depictions in it. And I got this. I have a cover artist named Charlotte Snilkter. She's a Swedish, and she did the cover art for that, and it was amazing. Manda Panda, do you have plans for Hugo to visit all the places in Tiermint? Yes, he will visit every single place in Tiermint, meet different creatures, different people, have different things happen. Da Vinci Code. Will Hugo leave with his friends after his education? Will he kill all 7 of the evil wizards? Yes. His friends do leave with him once he leaves university at the end of Act 2, which I still haven't finished writing. I'm still writing Act 2. His friends will leave with him because I feel like that's a right thing to do. I feel like it would be pointless if he's just like, he leaves university, he's like, all right, see ya. All right, nice knowing you. Like, it would defeat the purpose. And so having his friends go with him on his big quest would be pretty cool. And he does, yeah, he ends up killing all the wizards. Johnny Vegas, are you going to write about Vikings? Yes, eventually in the coming future, I will write a series about Vikings. James R. Who is your harshest critic? Probably my girlfriend. Honestly, probably my girlfriend. She is great. She's helped me. She's been with me literally since the beginning of me writing books, or really taking it seriously and like making my craft. She's a great source of information because she knows a lot about different types of history as well. She knows a lot more about like ancient history and Viking kind of stuff, and she knows a lot about mythologies more than I do. And she knows a lot about fantasy books because she's read a shit ton of fantasy books in her life. And so she's helped me a lot and immensely, like helping me like, hey, you should maybe change this or tell this differently, or maybe take this out of your book and or add this. Like, she's been very helpful with like the magic system and the runes and kind of like the story itself. She's really enjoying it a lot. I haven't read it to her in a while because we caught up very quickly. And so I'm wanting to get a lot of chapters under my belt before I start reading it to her again, because I don't want to just catch up and then the same thing's going to happen. So this book is going to take a long time. Like, I'm 7 months or a little over 7 months into writing this. So this could take me well over a year. So, and that's fine. I don't want to rush it. But yeah, she's probably my harshest critic in a good way. In a good way, babe. In a good way. But I value her opinion on my literary stuff very much. And she's been a great inspiration for me. And I love you, baby. Octo Prince, does Marquis' skin get stitched back onto his spine in hell? I mean, yeah, that does happen. Danny Free, if you could own a ship, what would you name her? I would name her the Dragon Blood or something. I don't know. I just always find like Dragon's Blood or like Fireheart or something, like just really cool names. So maybe something like that. DP, does Hugo end up going to another realm? Does he ever find the Emir? Okay, I've been asked a couple questions that would be spoilers. I will answer this one though. Yes, he does end up going to another realm called the Nidosphere, which is kind of similar to hell, but not quite. It's got similarities, but it's not like hell at all. He does end up finding the Emir, and he does end up becoming one. Yes, he does. He ends up going to Felton, which is the monastery town, with the mayor, and they end up searching for them, and they end up finding them. So yeah. Man Vine. Does Master Rivlin love Hugo? Does he love his friends? Yes, 100%. Hugo does love his friends, and his friends love him. Yes, Master Rivlin does love him, and I've actually already written a chapter where Rivlin tells him that he loves him, because he views, and I go a lot into a lot of the masters in this closer to the end of Act 2. I've written a lot of their backstories, like they talk about their childhoods, especially Master Rivlin and Mandrake. I really honed in on Mandrake, Elodin, Master Rivlin, and Exala Dal. But Rivlin talks about his childhood with Hugo while searching for the ever-glowing Sympathy lamp. And Master Rivlin had a son who passed away, and so Hugo reminds him of his son. And so Rivlin does tell Hugo that he does love him. Chance Jones, who is your fave master you've made up? Woo! That's hard. I'm gonna have to pick two. I have to pick two. Master Rivlin and Elodin, hands down. Caxtonith, the dragon. How do you evoke so much emotion in your characters? You depict it so well and have made me feel happiness and joy for triumph in the character, grief and sadness and low points. In Hugo, you have conveyed all of a young man's struggles in love, romance, fear, sadness, jealousy, happiness, and friends. Has it rubbed off on you? This is a similar question that I've been asked. Yeah, like you just need to depict human emotion, like as much as you can and as well as you can, to what we feel every day in our day-to-day lives. So yeah, it has rubbed off on me. I've based some characters off of emotions I felt before in the past and just currently at the moment when I'm writing. And so, I take inspiration from listening to like fantasy music while I'm writing it. Marquis' travels and story is one of the most saddest journeys I've ever seen written. It's dark and horrifying, it's grotesque and bloody. It's got pedo moments, gory moments, and glimmers of sunshine in it. I'm not saying the character was written poorly, just how he dies is horrible. Arm cut off, leg cut off, and dies alone and goes to hell, but he is redeemed. It made me cry for him. His story is so sad, but you depict him protecting the little girl so well, like a father or older brother type of bond. Why did you write such a sad tale? I wrote the tale because part of it has to do with the time period it's set in. Because during these medieval time periods in the 1300s, it was hard. It was a hard life. A lot of people, unless you're in royalty or a king or a baron or you own some piece of land or title or a knight, you were very poor. You were a farmer who barely can make ends meet, growing wheat, livestock. A lot of your crops and animals died in the winter, and some people starved. Some people couldn't keep a roof over their heads, and everything was built from the ground up. Like people built their houses, people built things, and so. And also at this time, a lot of the world was unknown. So I wanted to depict a very sad and dark tale of a knight who lost his knighthood falsely. It wasn't his fault, and kind of going through a plague-ridden France full of horror and terrible things, and get that across to the reader. And kind of like people were very awful back then. Like there were thieves and brigands. A lot of rape happened. A lot of pedophilia happened, sadly. There were good people, of course, like Marquis, who is a good person at heart. He's just rough around the edges. But yeah, it's just, I wanted to depict that gruesometality in a plague-ridden land at that medieval time period. And kind of the horror that comes with it, and like not knowing when you're going to get your next meal, or if you're going to sleep outside in the rain or in a nice tavern bed, Was Pierre Matthew gay? Why did Marquis not care about that since it's set during the Black Plague in 1348? Priests like that would have been killed. Yes, you're right. Priests like that would have been killed if they're homosexual. But it's because Marquis is generally a good person at it, deep down in his core and in his heart. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care if the priest was gay or liked men or whatever, or his sexual preference was guys. He's a good guy. And so Marquis didn't really care about that. He accepted that. Jarrett, in Chapter 8, was the King's Court and Knight Jousting Tournament real, or did Marquis get drunk and dream it? Sad face. I'm actually not going to answer that. I'm going to let you interpret that the way you interpret that. All right, we got 2 more questions, guys. Bond between the knight and the priest is so heartfelt. The priest was so conflicted with his inner demons of being gay in a time where that was not allowed. And Marquis struggled with falsely losing his land, wife, and knighthood. The religious qualms in this book is ripe with love. Why did you make a priest and a thief a friend? Mainly because of the strangeness of it. Because you wouldn't think a thief and a brigand and a priest, wouldn't be friends. But it ended up them being actually really, really close. And it was very sad when I had Pierre Matthew die in chapter 25, I believe. But it's to show that, like, 2 very unlikely people can meet and become the closest of brothers and realize that, yeah, they may have their own inner demons, but they're still the same. They're still both human beings. And so to have them bond over something so profound, like religion and being a thief, I think depicting that was honorable. Last question by L. Latu. Okay. What are your future plans?
It's a very vague question, Latu.
I don't really have much future plans other than, I guess, continuing to write and get my books out there and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. You know, enjoying my life with my girlfriend, my family, and friends. And thank you guys so much. I had a blast answering all your questions. That was a lot of questions. That was like 70 questions. Jesus Christ, my brain is muddled. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to send those to me. I really enjoyed answering, and I hope I answered all of them to your enjoyment. I really enjoyed that, so now I'm going to go edit this video and get it up on my channel so people could watch it. So thank you guys so fucking much for taking the time to spend it with me, and I really enjoyed spending it with you. So I will see you, my lovely little jack-o'-lanterns, in the next one.